My dear fellow human beings living in Gaza, my name is Rabbi Yitzhak David Smith, and I'm here with a message of hope for you, a message of what God Almighty wants for you and wants from you. God Almighty wants for you, like He does for every single human being, to know that you are created in God Almighty's divine image. And you are created with a purpose, and you are created lovingly and intentionally by God Almighty at every instant anew. You're created brand new every single instant. And God Almighty wants to bestow upon every one of His human beings, wants to give him abundance, wants to give him happiness, wants to give him peace in his home and peace in his land for the entire world. In order to have that, every human being must take responsibility for that. Must take responsibility to do the actions that God Almighty requires from you and from me and from everybody. And every human being is obligated to fulfill God Almighty's divine commandments. There's 7 overarching divine commandments: not to worship idols, not to curse God Almighty's name, God forbid, not to murder, not to be immoral, not to steal, not to eat the limb of a living animal, and to make sure that these other laws are brought to the attention lovingly to every single human being, and to enforce the laws. This is called dinim. This is every individual's responsibility. Is these laws are not the responsibility of a government somewhere. They're not the responsibility of an international body. These are your responsibility. And your responsibility is to make sure that the place that you're living is living according to these standards. Now, we all know that it's highly demoralizing that you and your families have been abandoned into the clutches, into the hands of Hamas and Ashaf, the PLO, and the Palestinian Authority, the PA. It's highly demoralizing that your lives were sacrificed to become fodder, to become prisoners of the terror regime of Hamas and the PLO and the PA that does not seek any good for you, but rather uses you as the fodder, as the things that they stand upon your heads to fight the Marxist war of national liberation. And we also know that they do not speak in the name of Islam. They do not speak in the name of anything other than Marxism and communist wars of national liberation to destroy. While they're saying that they want to attack the Jewish people, but they also want to, and primarily, attack the Arab people to bring them, and their goal is not only in Gaza, but in the whole land of Israel, God forbid, and in the entire Middle East, to bring everybody under a terror regime, God forbid, of communism and Marxism. So now is the time to take action as God Almighty blesses you to do and wants you to do. You have to make sure that there's no one anyone is coming in from Hamas to kill you, your family. You must get up and stand up and kill them first. And anyone that's coming and using your land that you live on and the houses that you use and the buildings that you use as a base to try to kill other people, you must drive them out. And you may think that you do not have the strength because you don't have the means, you don't have the training, and they keep you in fear, and they threaten your children, and they threaten your families all the time. But the answer is that God Almighty will give you the strength when you commit yourself to live according to God Almighty's will, and to understand that Hamas and the PLO and the Palestinian Authority and Islamic Jihad and the Islamic Brotherhood are all coming to make war against you. You are the target of their war, because they are making war against God Almighty. And every human being, as we said before, carries God Almighty's divine image. So they make war against every single one of you. So therefore, it is your merit, it is your particular merit to have the opportunity to stand up and not only speak strongly, but to act strongly to defeat them. And when you remove all these terrorists, all these machablim, all these people that seek your destruction from your midst, you will have the prosperity that God Almighty wants to bestow upon you, that He will have the abundance that God Almighty wants to bestow upon you. Gaza will become a flourishing and abundant place that will become a sign for the entire world of what happens when the communists and the Marxists are eliminated. And people are no longer scared of them, but rather take action, then you will be blessed. God Almighty will bless you with the rewards for all the actions that you take. And you could take those actions today, and you could take those actions by yourself. You could take those actions in conjunctions with other members of your family. You could gather neighbors together and say that enough is enough, that you want God Almighty's rule to reign, to rule in Gaza, and not the war against God Almighty, against the Arab people, against the Jewish people. That is not acceptable to be in any place in the world. So may God Almighty bless you with joy and the happiness to know that you are on a special mission from God Almighty. And with that joy, you will be able to overturn all those that come to scare you and all those that come and have imprisoned you. And you'll merit to break out of those bounds and to know that God Almighty is guiding you and giving you the strength to be able to take action and bring God Almighty's divine blessing upon yourselves and upon every person that you have and your reach and your community. And may God Almighty give you the strength to do this right now, propelling the entire world through your example into an era of complete goodness and in complete abundance for every single human being, when no human being will be afraid of any other human being, and everyone will know that there's nothing besides God Almighty, with the coming of Mashiach and the complete and true redemption of the entire world now, today. God bless you all.